So we are going to today work on some AWS Lambdas using serverless framework. Now I have been actually using serverless framework a bit before, but I gave up at some point, and we were using the SAM CLI, the serverless application model by AWS. Recently, though, I have switched to serverless framework, and it's actually evolved very well, and it's got a great tooling support. So I have been actually just within the last couple of weeks writing a few POC kind of lambdas with serverless framework. So I want to actually just show you how the serverless workflow is. The language I'm going to use today is TypeScript. Now that's basically because there's JavaScript support in Lambdas with Node.js 6.10 and 8.10 or something, two versions. But so we could use JavaScript, but I'm not going to use JavaScript. But I'm actually going to use TypeScript, which will actually just compile into JavaScript code. Now that way I'll actually just get all the completion and static typing, which I could actually which I'm a fan of actually. It really helps in development time. So there are two things we need installed to do this. We need to create an account in AWS console for you, and then you also need to install the AWS CLI in your computer. Now one of the ways to actually make sure that it works is if you go to the terminal window. So I have actually just configured it here. So you can just say AWS S3 ls, which is list all the S3 buckets in there. Now that shows me something. As long as you get some output, that's fine, which means it is working for you. You also have to install the other one, which is the serverless framework itself. Now if you have configured AWS CLI, you don't have to configure anything in serverless. It'll take the same configuration, which means the credentials, so it will connect to the same AWS account. So after installing serverless, you will actually be able to just type serverless in here. It will show you a bunch of options. You could also optionally type --help. It is the same thing anyways. Now these two installed, we are ready to go. We can actually just start on our first serverless application. So I'm going to scaffold the project right now with the serverless tooling. So I'll go to the terminal. One of the things I do before I actually create the application is I'll actually create a Git project right here. So I have created a folder called SLS friends. So I'll just initialize a Git repository here. Now there are two ways you can actually just type serverless commands. You can type serverless, or else you could also use SLS. That will also work. So I'm going to use SLS. If you want to create a project here, you could say SLS create. And if you just enter --help, it will actually give you all the options that you have for creation. Now one of the things I want you to pay attention to here is the templates. Now there are so many versions, so many languages that it supports. Now one of the languages that we are interested in here is AWS Node.js TypeScript. So that's what we are going to create. So let me create one application here. I'll just say SLS create template AWS Node.js TypeScript. Now once I do that, I press enter. There you go, that's done. If you read this carefully, it says it successfully created the boilerplate for it. And it's also asking us to please update the service property in serverless.yml with your service name. Well, that's because otherwise it will actually just go with the default name, which is like a hello or something. So we have successfully scaffolded our application. If I look through the files here, you see all the files in here. So let me close this console right now. I'll actually just see the files here. So I have all the files in here. Now one of the most important files in here is actually the serverless serverless.yml. So that actually just has the full configuration for your serverless application, the Lambda application. So the name right here is what we have to change. Actually, it's not hello, it's something else. So we can actually just change this to whatever we want. The plugins and all these actually just automatically created for us. And there is, if you actually just look at this, let's say, so provider is AWS, and the runtime, we understand what that is. And the functions, these are the Lambda handlers actually. So there's one handler here called hello. The handle name is actually handler.hello. Now if you see in the other side of the tree here, that's the handler.ts. So that's a TypeScript file that is having the handler. So if I actually just open that in here, we have the hello function. So that hello function is the handler that we are using here. So handler.hello. And events. So this is actually using AWS API gateway because it's a real API. So this one is going to be triggered from an API. So as you might know, you could actually trigger a Lambda through an API gateway, or you could also do that by some other events like CloudWatch event or S3 bucket event or something. So anyways, so that's this scaffolded application. We haven't actually just initialized the project yet. We'll do this. We can do this now. Let's quickly test the project locally. Now to do that, we need to install all the node modules that we need. I mean to build it and so on. So let me actually just close these windows. I'll just open a terminal here. Go there, and I'm just going to do a npm install. I'll install all the packages that we have in the packages.json. Wait for it. That's done. So we have installed all of those. What we can do now is we could actually invoke the project, the handler locally. That's one of the cool things about the serverless framework. So we could actually just test the Lambda before we actually just put it in the cloud. So how we do that is we say serverless invoke. Now this invoke will actually just try to invoke that in the cloud. So there's another option here. We could just say local. That would actually just run it locally. And we could say what the function is. So function, and what's the function actually? If you go again here, so the function is actually in here. So the functions, and the function name is hello. So I'm going to run that function here. Let's say, oh, hello, press enter. It did a bunch of things because it had to actually build that, and it's also in TypeScript, so it has to actually just do a transpilation thing as well. Now once that is done, actually it executed this. If you actually just see this output here, this piece of the output is actually the result. So we could go back in here, go to the handler. Now this handler is actually returning this message, go serverless webpack something. So that output is in here along with the status code. So yeah, it works fine. So we have tested that. Now we can actually deploy that to AWS, and we can test that in the cloud itself. So how do we do that? We would just say SLS deploy. Now there's one thing to remember actually. When you do SLS deploy, it will actually deploy that to the default region, no matter what your region is, like in your AWS configuration. So your AWS configuration in your AWS CLI could be actually let's say in my case it is Asia Pacific Southeast 2, but SLS deploy will actually deploy that to US West. Let me just quickly go here and see if there's anything in here. No, there's nothing there. So that's where it is actually just going to. So let's see some options here. Just going to actually just type help here. Now as you can see, there's a region thing here as well, -r or -region. So you could actually just give the region there. So because I want to actually just deploy this to So let me deploy this to, let's deploy this to my region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say region AP Southeast 2. Okay, so that will deploy that. Let's press enter. So it's going to do a bunch of things here. It's actually just going to package the service after creating that. It creates a stack, which is a CloudFormation stack. And it's good to create that because it can actually just roll that back, and it also knows what are the resources that were created. If you change this, then it will actually just know what to change or what to remove. And it also, after creating the package, it has to update that to an S3 bucket. So it will create an S3 bucket for itself just to keep the artifacts. There you go. So it's uploading the zip file to S3. And it's a validating template as well. That's the template that we are having here, the serverless-YML. And updates the stack, which is a CloudFormation command. Basically what it does is actually it is bringing the service up. Now it's impressive, isn't it? Like, so the uploading service.zip file to S3, that's just 68.71 kilobytes. That's like nothing. So it's pretty good. Now, one of the reasons for that, I think, is because this doesn't actually just include a lot of node modules. It's just, so this handler is actually using AWS Lambda, and that's available inside of the AWS tooling. So it doesn't really have to pack that because it's available in AWS. So I think it does not do that. So it's pretty lean. So there you go. That's completed. And it also gives us an endpoint that we could hit. So we could hit this endpoint, and we could also actually just test it otherwise. So let me test it in the other way. So previously we ran SLS invoke local. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to invoke that here, but without having local. So which means it's actually just going to run it in the cloud. Now one of the other things here is, here again we have to give the region. Now there's a solution to this, having to type this again and again, but let's do this for the time. So I would say AP Southeast 2. I think that sounds correct. I think that's how it is. Let's see if it works. Oh, there you go. So that's working. So that's tested. You could also actually hit that get endpoint and see if it is working. So if I actually just grab that from here, let me just copy this quickly. So that's the piece. I'm just going to bring it here. Mess my file here just to copy that. So let's copy that here. And what I would do, I wonder if I have curl here. Actually, if I don't have curl, that's going to be a problem. So I don't have curl. So I'll have to actually just test it in some other way. Let's see if I could actually just go to PowerShell here. And paste the same thing. See if it has curl. Oh, there you go. That worked. Yeah, so that actually prints everything. So there you go. It has that command. So the content, the status code, status description, all of that. So I exit from here. Exit again. There you go. Undo this mess. That's all done. Before I go any further, I actually just want to do a commit, and so that we can actually just go back to the previous if we actually just make any changes in here that we do not want. So I'm going to add all of these and just make a commit here. I'll just say that is initial commit, the most favorite commit message of all. Done. That's committed. So the project that I'm going to work on is actually just a simple thing that would say, like, just store the store a list of friends, and I could add friends and delete friends and so on. So I might actually just also use Dynamo DB as a database. So I'll change this handler. So the handler name is right now hello. What I would do is actually I just go to the serverless here, and I'll change this name of the handler, and I'd say that's list, and I would say this is handler dot hello. I'll probably actually, so this handler here is actually the name. So actually let me do something here. What I would do is I actually just create a folder called friends here, and I'll actually just create something called list.ts. Now my intention is to actually just have one lambda there, a handler there that will actually just list all the friends. So we'll do that. I could actually just start a lambda in there. So I could go to the handler here and I can copy everything in here, and I'll just actually just make a copy out of it. Rename this to list, and I'll also change this to listing my friends. We'll fix this later, but right now that's what I have done. So we have the hello function here. Let's keep that just for the time. We'll remove it at some point. I'll just create something called list. Now the handler here is actually friends. I'm just going to say friends, and list, and list is the file name, and the handle name is also list. Now that's one of the patterns, as I saw actually. The path, so this is a path for the API. So I would say friends. So if I actually hit the friends endpoint and with the HTTP method get, it'll actually just hit this this lambda. There you go. Now you should be able to make that change, take it across. So let's test this quick. So I'll open a terminal window and I'll say SLS invoke local, and again I'm going to say function list. Now again the function name is list here, so let's see if it works. Nice, so that works. So with that working, we have done some changes here. Let me just make another commit real quick. So let's see. Okay. Okay, so we could deploy that too. Now before I deploy that, however, actually I'll remove this hello because we know the other one is working now, so we don't need to refer to that anymore. So I'm going to delete this too, so that handler is gone now. So that's gone. Now what will happen to what we already deployed to AWS? What we can do is we could just say SLS remove. Now what that will do is that will actually just remove it from remove whatever is deployed from AWS. Wait for that to complete. Well, actually, I think this will fail because we didn't include the region. That's one of the problems we have right now. So it does not exist, obviously. So I'm going to make some change here now. The change I'm going to make is I'm going to actually include the region in my serverless YML file. Let's see how I could do that. I'm just actually looking to a reference right now. Right, let's come back here. What I could do in the provider here is I could actually also provide the region. Now that will actually just make sure that our commands do run in here with no problem because it knows the region. So there you go. After including that, I'm running it again. Now we don't have to include that region repeatedly now. Wait for that to complete. Done. So we have removed that. We could actually also deploy the new one. So let me quickly deploy the new one, and I'm not going to indicate the region anymore. At the end of this, we will get the endpoint, so we'll see how many endpoints are there. So if our hello function is still available or is still deployed, we should be having 2 endpoints, whereas in this case it should be 1 because we removed the other one. Wait for that to complete. Right, so that's completed. So there's one function now and one endpoint. That's all good. So I'm going to make one last commit in here before we actually just move to the next. Let's go here. We have removed some of the stuff, so I'm going to add this comment. So we have our Lambda now that lists as a reference, although it doesn't do that yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually add support for Dynamo DB, so I could actually just query the Dynamo database. So there are a few things to do to be able to do that. So let's update the serverless YML file that contains the definition for the lambdas. So we need to add the permissions for the lambda to actually talk to the Dynamo database. We also need to actually just create a Dynamo database table so that we could actually just put our data in there. So it's a NoSQL database. We don't really need to actually just configure much. We just have to say that the table has the table has to be there. So the way to do that is to actually add a resources section in here. So let me quickly actually just copy something from here. just paste it here. Now you see the serverless definition has functions, provider, plugins, and service. Now we already have we have also added resources now. Now the resources has actually two resources. Now this resources in here is actually saying the serverless resources, which is an abstraction over the provider, which is AWS, and this is actually AWS CloudFormation template compliant YML definitions. So it also needs to have a resources thing in case that you are actually just you wonder why that is there. So we're going to add a table name called friends table, and so the table name is actually in here. That's one of the things actually. So table name we could have actually just hard coded in here. What I would rather do is I'll actually just add an environment variable. So unless we add an environment variable, we will not be able to share the name from here to our Lambda code, the TypeScript code. So that's the other bit to do. So I'll copy the environment variable. Now environment variable is actually going to be added in here. So in the provider we could actually also add the environment variable. So it's just indent it properly. So that's the table name. I call it friends table. So that's the Dynamo DB table name. So I'm using the same thing in here in the table name. So we will create that table as a resource once we actually deploy that. The other thing is we also need to actually just have like the definitions for what are the attribute names that we consider as IDs and what are their data types, and the key schemas and all that. I'm not going to go into those details right now. Let's just get this done. The other thing, however, is we also need to what we do now is we actually create the resource. We also need to add the permissions for our Lambda to talk to the database. So what I would do is I'll add another section into the provider again, and that would contain the IAM role statements. So basically it is going to state that these things do have so all the lambdas in here do have access to so allow access. So it's actually allowing access of all these different types to this resource. So the types here, the one that I would worry about right now is actually scan, because I just need to actually get the items. Scan or get the item actually, or query. But I'm just going to give all the resources anyways, so all the accesses anyways, so that I don't have to come back here. But in your case, like if you are you have to be careful with the kind of permissions that you give to the lambdas, and it is your code anyway. So yep. So that done, I should be able to actually deploy this, and it will actually just create a table for me. So that's our lambda. Since we are using TypeScript, we have all the types in here, so we could actually see what the definitions are. So I'm going to go back there. I need to add the Dynamo DB support now. So let's go back to the terminal. I need to install a bunch of packages for that. One is AWS SDK. That has extensions for using most of the AWS resources. I also need to add the types for that, only for the development. That's done. Now once that is done, I should be able to import that from here. Let's quickly go and see what it's available. So there you go, Dynamo database is available there. So I'm going to add it from here. So which means we would be able to create a client now to query all the friends in our database. So let's create a client. So there's a document client here. I'm going to use the document client. And I will need to talk to that client and say client dot let's say scan and it's looking for some params, and that's what I'm going to do. Now this will actually return a promise, so we can actually just listen on this promise. Now in Node.js 8.1 we could actually await on this one, so I'm going to wait on this, put that inside some results. So let's call this const friends. Now we don't really know what these parameters are, so let's go here and see what these parameters are. So the parameters are document client scan input, so that's the parameter type. So let me go back in here and create some parameters. Params that should be Dynamo DB document client scan input, right? So that needs to have some things. So what are the things it needs to have? It needs to have a table name. So I can get the table name from the environment variables because we added that into the environment variable. So it was called Dynamo DB table. So I could do that. I think that looks all right. I missed one equation here. Let's go in here quickly. There you go. That's done. So now I can actually get my friends. And after getting that, so this friends is actually, this is, I'm going to call this results. Now the results will have a set of items because this is an scan output. I will get some results out of it. So let's put the results in here. And what I would additionally do is, here we have a message. So the body is a message and some input. So I'm going to change this body right now. Let's quickly, I think I'm going to need JSON.stringify. So I'm going to change everything inside of JSON.stringify here, and I would say results.items. Okay, so that should ideally return all of the friends that we have. Now we don't have anything yet. We should get like a empty list. So let me go to the terminal now to deploy this. But before I do that, actually I forgot one thing here. In the resources I also need to indicate the capacity units that I am provisioning this for. So let me quickly do that. So I would say provision throughput read and write capacity is 1. I'll just do an SLS deploy here. This will take some time. It also has to create a Dynamo DB table now. That's one more additional resource. That's done. So I should also be able to test this now if I wanted to. So I could just say SLS invoke. I could do a local invoke as well, but it'll talk to the same database, so it's a good thing. So the function is list. There you go. So we don't have any items in the database, so it'll just return an empty array. But either way, it doesn't return any error, so which means it's working. I could also invoke that in the cloud. It's the same thing, so which means it is working. So I could also do a call if I wanted to. So I got this endpoint. Let's quickly do that also. So like I did before, I have to go to PowerShell. I could actually do this. That's the endpoint we are hitting. There you go. It works.